You're listening to Nocturnal Nightmares. While the world sleeps peacefully, we open the door to what lies beneath. The stories that surface in silence, the fears that rise in the dark. These are not dreams, they are reminders. Stay with us. And don't close your eyes just yet. This vigil wasn't mine to keep. The thought looped, a relentless mantra against the hushed cadence of the breathing machine filtering through Silas's cracked bedroom door. 2 in the morning, the air thick with the stale quiet of a house holding its breath. But Mom was fraying at the edges, worn thin, and my presence was the only offered solace. Silas. A year ago, the diagnosis landed like a stone. Rapid onset neurodegeneration. Clinical poetry for a brutal fact that my 32-year-old brother was dissolving, his body betraying him piece by agonizing piece, cause unknown. My phone flared, a harsh blue rectangle in the gloom. 2:07, nearly 5 hours stretched between now and the nurse's arrival, an eternity measured in the rhythmic sigh of the BiPAP. Hardwood groaned underfoot as I drifted towards the kitchen, the house sprawling around me, cavernous and unfamiliar in the deep night. Suburban silence, usually a comfort, now pressed against the glass like a tangible weight. Water sputtered through the coffee maker. Caffeine, a necessary bulwark against the encroaching fatigue, against the possibility of Silas's breathing faltering, needing the machine adjusted by hands steadier than his own could ever be again. Leaning against the cool laminate counter, thumbs pressing into tired eye sockets, I heard it. Leo. Clear, resonant, Silas's voice echoing inexplicably from the backyard. I froze, pulse fluttering against my fingertips. Impossible. Months had passed since he'd managed more than a strained whisper, and walking was a forgotten memory. Out here. Need you. Louder now, insistent. My mouth felt like sandpaper. Through the kitchen window, darkness stared back. The motion sensor floodlight remained stubbornly unlit. Nothing stirred beyond the skeletal shapes of Mom's dormant rose bushes and Dad's old shed. The yard lay still, utterly vacant. Silas? My own voice. A reedy imitation of sound. Only the thrum of crickets and the distant drone of a neighbor's air conditioner answered. Panic sent me skidding back towards his room, socked feet slipping on the polished floor. The door hinge whined its protest as I pushed it wider. There he lay, cocooned in the medical bed, mask obscuring his face, chest rising and falling with the machine's steady rhythm. The digital display glowed with reassuringly normal numbers. My hands trembled, fumbling the phone, activating its flashlight. The beam sliced through the shadows, painting stark geometries on the walls as I swept through the house. Living room, inert furniture draped in moonlight. Dad's study, dust motes dancing in the artificial beam. Guest bath, the relentless blink of the leaky faucet Mom perpetually meant to fix. Back in the kitchen, coffee sloshed over the rim as I poured, tremors betraying my frayed nerves. Exhaustion surely. 20 hours awake scrambled the senses, conjured auditory ghosts. I took a scalding gulp, the bitterness a sharp anchor. In here now, Leo. The voice, Silas's voice, unmistakable, behind me in the hallway. The mug crashed, ceramic exploding against tile. Hot liquid searing my shins, the pain distant, irrelevant. Because that wasn't just like Silas. It was him, the subtle Boston inflection acquired in college. The exact timbre lost months ago to the creeping paralysis. Not funny, I choked out to the vacant space. Who's there? Silence answered, immense and absolute. From the knife block, I pulled the heavy chef's knife, its weight cold and alien in my sweating palm. Reason insisted on a prank, a cruel, elaborate joke, but reason had fled, leaving raw instinct cowering in its place. The hallway yawned, a tunnel of darkness punctuated only by the faint cerulean glow of a nightlight near the bathroom. Each step forward amplified the floorboards' creaks into echoing reports. Check the closet. Closer. Just around the bend near the entryway. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat in my throat. Reaching blindly, my fingers found the hall light switch, flipped it. Nothing. A dead bulb. I pressed onward, spine scraping the wall, the knife feeling flimsy, useless. Reaching the corner, I inhaled sharply, then risked a glance. Empty, the front door stood sentinel, deadbolt firmly shut. No entry there. The coat closet yielded only the musty scent of winter wear and forgotten shoes. A sudden, heavy thump resonated from the floor above, directly overhead. My muscles locked. The second story should be deserted. I hadn't ventured up, had no need. Silas now occupied the converted downstairs study. Another thump, then the distinct, deliberate tread of footsteps crossing the upstairs landing. Retreat back to Silas's room, breath coming in shallow, ragged gasps. He remained oblivious, submerged in medically induced sleep. I eased his door shut, the click of the latch deafeningly loud, then fumbled for my phone again, fingers slick with sweat. Police? Report what? Phantom voices belonging to my helpless brother? Intangible footsteps in a locked house. More steps overhead, pacing slowly. They halted, directly above us. I flattened myself against the wall beside the doorframe, knife held high. A bead of sweat traced a cold path down my spine. The house's central air cycling on made me flinch violently. Look at him, the voice murmured, now chillingly close, just outside the door, so peaceful. My breath hitched. The doorknob began to rotate, slow, agonizingly precise. I braced, knife poised to strike. The door swung inward, revealing nothing, empty air. The vacant hallway stretched away. Frozen, I waited, listening. Only the steady whir of the BiPAP, the frantic rasp of my own lungs. Then a new sound. Wet, laborious dragging from the hall, like dead weight being hauled across the wood. Approaching. Run. The thought screamed, but Silas lay helpless. I couldn't leave him. Whatever lurked out there, I was his only shield. The dragging ceased just beyond the threshold. Want to see what I really look like now? The voice shifted, still Silas's, yet horribly distorted, filtered through water, warped. A flicker of movement in the hallway's deep shadows. A form coalesced, darker than the dark, ascending, stretching, impossibly tall, scraping the ceiling. A suggestion of a face, hideously malformed, proportions nightmarishly wrong. The scream tore from my throat, raw and primal. I lunged, knife slashing wildly through empty space, stumbling forward into the hall. Gone. The shape had vanished. The corridor was merely a corridor again. Slamming the bedroom door, I fumbled the lock, then shoved Silas's heavy oak dresser against it, the wood screeching in protest. Barricaded. Safe for now. My phone showed 2:43 a.m. 4 hours left. I sank to the floor beside Silas's bed, knife clutched tight, and waited. The voice returned sporadically through the long night, a phantom echo drifting from distant rooms. Sometimes Silas, sometimes a grotesque parody. More footsteps, more dragging. But the barricade held. It couldn't get in. Dawn brought the nurse at 7 sharp. She found me slumped against the wall, the knife resting beside me. Her questions about the dresser, the shattered mug, the coffee stains, met a mumbled evasion. A rough night. What else was there to say? Silas slept on, unaware, waking later to the same grim reality. A body inert, a voice silenced. Later that morning, I called Mom. Work, I lied, too demanding. I couldn't do the overnights anymore. Disappointment tinged her voice, but she accepted it. Guilt gnawed, sharp and persistent, yet the thought of returning to that house, to that suffocating quiet pregnant with unseen horrors, was unbearable. I knew what I heard, what I glimpsed. Something shares that house with Silas now. Something wearing his stolen voice, patiently waiting. Sometimes, late, alone in the sterile silence of my apartment, the phone rings. Silas's number glows on the screen. I stare until it stops. He can't dial. He can't call. And deep down, I know who or what is on the other end. The neon bled vacancy, a stuttering crimson pulse against the oppressive ink of the highway night. Into the fractured asphalt lot, little more than a constellation of craters, I steered my weary vehicle, engine sighing its relief. My own relief was tempered by exhaustion. Eyelids felt like weighted curtains after the endless reel of tarmac. Entering the embrace of the skeletal motel, I sensed nothing of the abyss yawning before me, the chasm of terror this night would become. My name is Finian. I chase horizons for a living, peddling sophisticated widgets across state lines. A vocation less about glamour, more about endurance and the lonely companionship of the road. This latest pilgrimage had dragged me through 3 territories in as many days, my spiel wearing thin even to my own ears. Midnight had long bled into the subsequent hour when I surrendered. Adrift in a geography devoid of landmarks, my digital navigator offering only static indifference. Thus, the flickering promise of the Cypress Shade Inn felt less like salvation, more like the only conceivable port in an encroaching storm. Decrepitude clung to the structure like ivy. Paint surrendered in peeling strips. Exterior lamps offered only intermittent, dying flickers, and the lot itself seemed poised to swallow my car whole. Yet fatigue is a powerful negotiator. The thought of simply closing my eyes, even within the cramped confines of my sedan, was a siren song. I crunched across the gravel path to the office door. A discordant jangle, from an overhead bell pierced the silence, announcing my presence to an apparently vacant reception. The air hung thick, a tapestry woven from stale tobacco, mildew, and an underlying sour note that puckered the senses. "Greetings." My voice, hoarse, echoed slightly. I leaned across the scarred laminate counter, peering towards a shadowed doorway behind it. "Is anyone tending the desk?" A rustle, then the slow scrape of reluctant footsteps. From the gloom emerged a figure, gaunt and desiccated, blinking against the weak overhead bulb as if roused from a century's slumber. A plausible assumption, given the hour. Room? The word was less a question, more a dry rasp. A key already dangling from his fingers. A yawn threatened to split my jaw. I nodded. Just the one night, gone by sunrise. He proffered the key, attached to a grubby plastic rhombus, etched with the number 13. Naturally. 50, he stated, his gaze clouded and ancient, pinning me. Hard currency. I extracted the bills, careful to avoid the brush of his papery, liver-spotted skin. He folded the money directly into a pocket. The ornate, dust-shrouded cash register remaining untouched. "Checkout's 11 sharp," he muttered, already performing a shuffling retreat towards the back shadows. No returns. He vanished, leaving me adrift in the musty quiet. An unease, cold and unwelcome, coiled in my gut. I dismissed it as fatigue's phantom limb and returned to my car for my valise. Room 13 skulked at the property's furthest extremity. Shrouded in deeper shadow, the key fought the lock, a stubborn metallic argument, before the door groaned open on protesting hinges, a sound perfectly orchestrated for unease. The interior matched my bleakest forecasts. Cramped, dim, furnished with relics likely deemed antiquated during the Eisenhower administration. Yet the mattress, beneath a thin coverlet, appeared passably clean, and in that moment, cleanliness was secondary to oblivion. Bag dropped, shoes shed. I collapsed onto the bed, succumbing to sleep's undertow almost instantly. How long I drifted, I cannot say. Awareness returned gradually, snagged by a sound, faint at first, easily mistaken for dream debris, a delicate scratching, like tiny claws worrying at timber. As consciousness sharpened, the sound localized. It emanated from my room door. I bolted upright, adrenaline flooding my system, heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. The scratching persisted, escalating from tentative exploration to insistent demand. Then chillingly the brass doorknob began to rotate. Locked. I had locked it. The deadbolt, the chain. Hadn't I? Yet the knob turned. A slow, inexorable revolution. Paralyzed by a primordial dread, I watched as the door cracked inward. A sliver of the parking lot's jaundiced light pierced the gloom, illuminating the intruder. A hand, bone-white and unnervingly slender. Its fingers curling spider-like around the door's edge. The sight shattered my paralysis. I scrambled from the bed, throwing my weight against the door, fumbling desperately with the chain lock, finally sliding it home. The hand retracted with viperous speed. A low hiss, sharp with frustration, breathed from the other side. "Who is it?" My voice trembled, a poor imitation of authority. "I've dialed emergency services." Only silence answered, profound and absolute. Then faint footsteps receded along the concrete walkway. I remained plastered to the door, muscles screaming, straining to decipher any noise above my own ragged breathing. An eternity later, perhaps mere minutes, I risked the peephole's distorted eye. Empty. The walkway lay deserted under the sickly sodium lamps. The remainder of the night passed in a state of hypervigilant misery. Huddled in the room's far corner, the feeble glow of the desk lamp my only shield, a small folding knife slick in my sweating palm. Every nocturnal sigh of the old building, every rustle of wind through unseen pines, sent jolts of terror through me. Escape felt impossible. The unseen visitor might linger, patient, just beyond the flimsy door. Dawn arrived not as a promise, but as a grudging concession, filtering gray and tentative through the window's grime. Only then did I dare move, back and with trembling hands, propelled by a singular urge, distance, miles of it, separating me from room 13. Gingerly, I opened the door, half expecting a confrontation. The walkway remained empty. My car sat solitary, save for a battered pickup truck near the office, presumably belonging to the proprietor. I navigated the treacherous parking lot at a near run, tossing my bag onto the passenger seat, keys already fumbling towards the ignition. A voice, dry as autumn leaves, startled me violently. "Departing already?" Spinning, I faced the gaunt custodian. Daylight was unkind, rendering his pallor more corpse-like, his eyes deeper sockets in a parchment face. "Ah, yes," I stammered, the urge to flee nearly overwhelming. "Early start, long drive." He offered a slow, deliberate nod, a smile stretching his thin lips in a way that felt profoundly unnatural. "A pity. We find ourselves starved for company lately." The emphasis on "we" resonated like a struck gong, sending ice water through my veins. I muttered an incoherent farewell, practically vaulting into the driver's seat. Tires spat gravel as I accelerated out of the cypress shade-in, leaving twin scars on the blighted asphalt. Miles melted away beneath my wheels, yet my hands still shook, gripping the steering wheel with white-knuckled intensity. The conviction of a near miss, an escape from something deeply wrong, clung to me like the motel's musty scent. What waited on the other side of that door? Who or what had sought entry? Hours later, across state lines, surrounded by the mundane bustle of a brightly lit service plaza, the terror lingered. Closing my eyes conjured the image, that pale skeletal hand reaching, curling. Upon reaching my final destination, I contacted the regional constabulary, relaying the night's events. They recorded my account with professional detachment, yet their skepticism was palpable. Frankly, bathed in the sanity of daylight, the experience felt increasingly unreal, a fever dream born of exhaustion. Weeks dissolved into routine. Then, a call. A detective. They had investigated the Cypress Shade Inn, found it derelict, shuttered. According to county archives, it hadn't welcomed a guest in over a decade. Was I certain of the location? Perhaps I'd mistaken it. But the memory was branded indelible. The sign, the room, the proprietor, the hand. I resigned from my traveling post shortly thereafter. The open road, the anonymous motel rooms, they held no allure, only echoes of dread. Now ensconced in urban predictability, I occupy a desk, sleep in my own familiar bed. Yet sometimes in the deep velvet quiet of the night, a faint scratching seems to whisper at the edge of hearing, perhaps at my very own door. A cold dread unfurls within me then, and I ponder whether the entity from room 13, denied its entry that night, had somehow followed me home. What transpired at the Cypress Shade Inn remains an enigma. A hallucination woven from fatigue, a waking nightmare, or a brush with something ancient and inexplicable, lurking just off the beaten path, I cannot say. I know only this. Some vacancies beckon not with solace, but with shadows, and are best left eternally unfilled. A dry twig's fracture, sharp as gunshot in the arboreal hush, arrested our motion. Hours we'd walked, steeped in the cathedral quiet of the deep woods, until that solitary report ripped the peace away. Drawn close, ears straining against the encroaching twilight. We couldn't fathom how swiftly our communion with solitude would devolve into a primal scramble against predators far deadlier than fang or claw. Leo, that's me. Wilderness has been my sanctuary since boyhood. This expedition, months in the dreaming, was with Maya and Finn, souls tethered to mine by shared histories and a thirst for the untamed. We sought a forgotten fold in the Appalachians, a cartographer's rumor, lured by the siren song of genuine isolation. Ignorance then felt like bliss. We couldn't guess the darkness coiled within that beauty. Our haven materialized beside a chattering brook in a sun-dappled glade, the very picture of sylvan perfection. 2 days unfolded like a dream. Treks through sun-shafted woods, trout pool gleaming from the current, firelight painting our faces as laughter mingled with crackling embers. A pocket paradise, we thought it. The third dawn beckoned us further, into woods that thickened, swallowed light, the understory tangling like ancient secrets. A thrill coursed through us, explorers charting the uncharted. Then, voices, not the cheerful calls of fellow wanderers, but coarse, grating tones slicing through the stillness. Annoyance curdled into unease. We sank low behind a moss-furred log, part in fronds, to witness a scene that iced my veins. A rough assembly of men, bristling with firearms, clad in mismatched, faded camouflage, hunched over a map unfurled on a crate. Their words were jagged shards of anger. "Told you the stash is right here," one snarled, stabbing a grimy finger at the parchment. "Gotta shift it. Feds are sniffing too close." Maya's fingers dug into my arm, her gaze wide with stark terror. We had blundered into a viper's nest. Millimeter by careful millimeter, we retreated, but the forest floor, littered with treachery, snagged Finn's boot. He pitched back, a spray of snapping twigs exploding like firecrackers in the charged air. Heads jerked up, hard eyes raking the tree line. "Who's out there?" a guttural voice demanded. "Show." No thought, only instinct. We bolted. Adrenaline surged, a raw, metallic taste. We plunged through the grasping undergrowth, branches lashing our faces. The sounds of pursuit, guttural shouts, heavy footfalls, hot on our heels. "So split!" Finn choked out between ragged breaths. "They can't follow all of us." Logic warred with the desperate urge to stay united, but the grim calculus was undeniable. A fleeting, frantic nod passed between us. A silent pact before we scattered like startled quail into the deepening woods. I scrambled downhill, gravity my unwilling ally, seeking the silver ribbon of the stream we'd camped beside. Water, the great eraser of trails. The woods became a vertiginous smear of green and brown, my pulse a frantic drum against my ribs. Footsteps pounded behind, gaining. Sheer panic clawed at my throat. I throttled it back. Focus. I erupted from the tree line onto the stream's slick, mossy stones, nearly tumbling. Without pause, I plunged into the shocking, breath-stealing cold. Submerged to my waist, I fought the current downstream, a desperate, sodden flight. Minutes later, or perhaps an eternity, I hauled my shivering body into a shallow recess gouged beneath an overhang of rock. Flattened against the damp stone, gulping air silently, I heard it. The distinct slosh of boots in water. I turned to ice. A form materialized, dark against the fading light, passing mere inches from my refuge, rifle held ready. He paused, head cocked, listening. My heart hammered. Discovery felt inevitable. Then, impossibly, he moved on, his pursuit continuing down the waterway. I remained entombed in that dripping crevice until cramp in agony seized my limbs and the last vestiges of daylight bled from the canopy. Only then did I venture out. An unnatural silence had fallen. The usual twilight chorus of birds and insects was eerily absent. A hollow ache opened within me. Maya. Finn. Where were they? Had the forest or the men claimed them? Night transformed the woods into a labyrinth of menacing shapes and phantom sounds. Each rustle whispered of pursuit. Hope dwindled with the light, then faint as a moth's wing beat, a whistle drifted through the trees. 3 descending notes, the simple tune we'd devised years prior for just such a desperate contingency. My pulse surged. Maya? Finn? I crept towards the source, heart a frantic bird against my ribs. It led me to a near impenetrable tangle of rhododendron. A hand emerged pale in the gloom, beckoning. Maya, filthy, scratched, her face a mask of exhaustion but breathing, alive. We clung to each other, a silent testament to terror shared and relief profound. Finn? I breathed against her hair when we finally pulled apart. She shook her head, fresh tears tracing paths through the grime. I hoped. With you. We huddled through a black, interminable night in that thorny sanctuary, sleep an impossible luxury. We kept vigil in shifts, nerves stretched taut, starting at every skittering leaf, every groan of timber. The forest, once inviting, now felt alien and predatory. Dawn's grey light revealed our stark necessity. Find Finn, escape this cursed wilderness, but the hunters remained. their presence a palpable weight. We moved with the caution of prey, scanning for any trace of our friend, acutely aware that death could be concealed behind any trunk, beneath any fern. Mid-morning, a single sharp report cracked the air, echoing brutally, sending birds erupting from the canopy. Maya and I exchanged a look of shared sickening dread. Finn, caution wrestled with the frantic need to know. We crept forward, ascending a low rise. Below, in a trampled clearing, the scene unfolded like a nightmare. The armed men clustered, and kneeling amongst them, Finn, my spirit plummeted. His face was a ruin of bruises and blood, hands bound tight behind him. The apparent leader loomed over him, pistol glinting. "Last chance," the man's voice rasped, low and dangerous. "Where are the others?" Finn lifted his head, spat crimson defiance. "Go to hell." The pistol rose, aimed, time fractured. Pure instinct took over. I snatched a hefty stone, hurling it with all my strength into the dense woods flanking the clearing. Head swiveled towards the crash. In that instant, Maya and I exploded from cover. I slammed into the leader, a tangle of limbs and curses, his pistol skittering away. Maya darted towards Finn, fumbling with his bonds. Chaos erupted, a desperate, flailing melee. Fear lent me unnatural strength. Maya's knife severed the ropes and Finn, battered but resolute, threw himself into the fray. Amid the pandemonium, a gap opened. We seized it, scrambling free, running with the speed born of sheer terror. The forest floor a blur beneath pounding feet. Angry yells and sporadic gunfire pursued us. But we didn't look back, didn't falter, running until our chests burned and our legs threatened to buckle. We collapsed, gasping, on the improbable verge of cracked, sun-bleached asphalt. A road, civilization. The sight, mundane yet miraculous, threatened to undo me. Staggering, ragged specters caked in mud and fear, we waved frantically at the first approaching vehicle. An elderly couple peered out, understandably alarmed by our wild appearance. But the raw desperation in our eyes, our choked pleas, must have pierced their caution. They bundled us into their car, the scent of lemon polish, a surreal counterpoint to our ordeal, and drove us towards the nearest town and the sanctuary of the law. We recounted the nightmare, the armed encampment, the whispered talk of illicit caches, the relentless pursuit. Our fragmented story, delivered through exhaustion and shock, was met with grave attention, escalating quickly through ranks of authority. Recuperating under the sterile lights of a small hospital in the days that followed, the fragmented truth coalesced. Our pursuers weren't mere criminals, but members of an entrenched extremist cell using the wilderness as cover. Our accidental intrusion had unraveled their operations, leading to swift, decisive action by federal agents. They called us heroes, improbable catalysts. It felt hollow. We were simply Leo, Maya, and Finn, seekers of solitude who had stumbled into the heart of human darkness. That passage through fire forged something unbreakable between us, yet scarred us profoundly. The wilderness still calls to me, its beauty undimmed, but now a constant vigilance underlies the peace. A shadow lingers, a reminder that deepest forests sometimes conceal threats far more savage than any beast, threats that walk upright and carry malice in their hearts. Midnight found Elias adrift in his bed, sealing a blank canvas for anxieties painted by the house's nocturnal whispers. Creaks and sighs echoed from unfamiliar corners. The property agent's assurance, attic's clear bit of harmless clutter, offered little solace. A need to confront the unseen, to quell the rising tide in his chest, propelled him upward. Each riser of the narrow stairs groaned beneath his weight, a prelude to the cold, pitted brass of the attic doorknob. Beyond the threshold, the air hung thick and dead, heavy with the scent of time and neglect. His nostrils flared against the assault of dust. His flashlight beam sliced through the gloom, supplementing the wan glow of a solitary fly-specked bulb. Cardboard sarcophagi slumped against the far wall, flanked by skeletal chairs, the fractured carcass of a dresser, and drifts of yellowed newsprint. And there, positioned centrally, gazing toward the single grime-streaked window like a silent sentinel, stood an old rocking chair, hewn from dark, substantial timber. Its arched back and worn smooth arms spoke of countless hours, countless occupants. Elias approached, his light tracing the contours of the rocker. A fine shroud of dust muted the seat's pattern. Minor scars marred the legs and arms, testaments to its long existence. He swiped a bead of sweat from his brow, the back of his hand coming away damp. The airless heat pressed in, clinging to his shirt, amplifying the silence. He swept the flashlight's eye across the floorboards beneath the chair. Only dust bunnies and the delicate architecture of cobwebs met the beam. For a beat, he stood baffled. Why the earlier prickle of fear? The space felt utterly mundane, a repository of forgotten things. He shuffled deeper, nudging a box here, peering behind a stack of papers there, hunting for vermin or some rational source for the house's groans. Nothing. The quiet held absolute dominion. Turning to retreat, his gaze snagged once more on the rocking chair. Did it shift? A fractional tremor, perhaps only the ancient timbers of the house settling into the night. He froze, breath caught in his throat, eyes locked onto the static form. It remained inert. A dismissive shake of his head, a quick exit, the decisive click of the lock turning in the door. Back in the relative safety of his room, sleep remained a distant shore. 2 hours past midnight, the silence fractured. A faint, rhythmic creaking drifted down, insidious, persistent. Wood complaining against wood. From above, heart hammering a frantic rhythm against his ribs, Elias snatched a flashlight and bolted for the stairs again, caution overridden by a desperate need for certainty. At the landing, he pressed his ear to the cool wood of the attic door. The creak was undeniable now, a steady, metronomic friction. His fingers fumbled briefly with the lock before the door swung inward. There it was, rocking back and forth in the gloom, a solitary island of motion in the otherwise static landscape of the attic. Sweat bloomed on his forehead as his hands began to tremble. He raised the flashlight, pinning the chair in its beam. The motion faltered, slowed, and then ceased altogether. The air thickened, pressing down, a palpable weight against his chest. Elias forced his feet forward, the soles of his shoes scuffing loudly across the dusty planks. He circled the now motionless chair, his light probing its structure. No threads, no wires, no visible mechanism for its animation. Kneeling, he reached out a hesitant hand and nudged the curved runner. It yielded smoothly, rocking with an easy grace, emitting the very squeak and groan cadence he'd heard from below. The sound echoed unnervingly in the stillness. He rose, stepped back, a profound sense of the absurd washing over him. It was wooden joinery, inanimate. It couldn't move unaided. He clicked off the flashlight, plunged the attic into the weak amber bath of the single overhead bulb. His eyes scanned the space. No draft stirred the dust motes. The window remained firmly shut. The air was stagnant. Relighting the torch, he cast one final, searching look at the impassive chair before retreating down the stairs, the silence feeling heavier than before. Another hour bled away before the creaking resumed, insistent, pulling him from the edge of exhausted slumber. Cursing the relentless disturbance under his breath, Elias ascended once more, this time leaving the flashlight off, relying on instinct and the faint memory of the layout. He eased the door open, slipping inside like a thief. The rhythmic groan was sharper now in the near dark, amplified by the silence. Under the dim wash of the ceiling bulb, the chair performed its solitary dance, slow and deliberate. A knot tightened in Elias's stomach. He swallowed against a dry throat, leaning on the doorframe for support. Wind, floor vibrations, settling foundations. Rational explanations crumbled, inadequate against the stark reality before him. He risked a single step into the room. The rocking ceased instantly. He retreated a pace. It resumed soft and steady. Forward again, stillness back in motion. A bizarre, silent dialogue of advance and retreat. The thought surfaced, unbidden and chilling. If it moves, can it perceive? He didn't voice the question, merely shaped it in his mind. Can you understand me? As the mental query formed, the chair's rocking intensified, the wood groaning louder against the floor. Panic fluttered in his chest. He recoiled from speaking aloud, unwilling to add his own voice to the unnatural tableau. He projected another thought, simpler this time. Stop. The motion decelerated, then died. A glacial chill traced his fingertips. He backed further toward the doorway, breath shallow. Rock again. The chair obeyed, tilting forward, then back, a coarse rasp accompanying the movement. Dizziness washed over him. Who are you? The question screamed silently in his head. The response was immediate and terrifying. The chair began to buck violently, its squeak escalating into a ragged shriek. No words, no spectral whispers, only this furious, articulate motion. Compelled by a morbid curiosity that overrode his fear, Elias advanced slowly, extending a trembling hand. His fingers brushed the worn curve of the backrest. The wood was shockingly cold, an unnatural chill that bit deeper than the ambient air, racing up his arm like ice water injected into his veins. He snatched his hand back as if burned. The rocking instantly ceased, and then he heard it. Low, guttural, and unmistakable. A smothered chuckle, seeming to emanate from the very air around him. Brief, yet profoundly disturbing. His eyes darted wildly around the cluttered space. Empty. Utterly empty. He backed away, breathing raggedly through his mouth, tongue thick and dry. The chair remained a static silhouette. What do you want? He projected. A slow, almost hesitant rocking began. The gentle sway, paradoxically accompanied by a rough, grating squeak. The hair on his arms prickled. He waited, but only the monotonous rock and creak answered. He tried again, focusing his will. Why are you here? The rocking gained force, the creak deepening into a harsh groan. Enough. He needed to escape this oppressive space. Turning, he placed a foot onto the top step of the staircase. The motion behind him stopped abruptly. He paused, hand braced on the doorframe, mind momentarily blank, suspended in the tense silence. Then cautiously, he allowed the thought. I'm leaving. The chair remained still. He didn't wait for a retraction, scrambling down the stairs and twisting the key firmly in the lock. Sleep offered no refuge the following night. Restlessness gnawed at Elias. Pacing his room until the inevitable pool of midnight drew him back towards the attic stairs. This time, he carried an old desk lamp, its cord trailing behind him. Plugging it into a dusty wall socket, he flooded the space with a harsh, clinical white light that banished the comforting shadows but amplified the sense of sterile dread. He stood several feet away, studying the chair under the stark illumination. The fine crazing in the varnish, the geography of old stains and deeper gouges, the undeniable aura of age and use. He took a breath, steadied himself. Move. A single deliberate rock answered the silent command. Elias flinched, a jolt running through him, sweat prickling his lower back. Move harder. The chair obliged, accelerating into a steady, rhythmic rocking, the familiar creak filling the air. He held his hands out slightly, palms forward, a useless warding gesture. Was it truly reading his thoughts? He ventured a more complex query, forming the words carefully in his mind. Tell me what you are. The reaction was explosive. The chair didn't just rock, it slammed back and forth with such ferocity that its runners screeched and scraped across the wooden floorboards, gouging the surface. The noise was jarring, ugly. Elias stumbled backward, hand flying to his mouth as dust billowed up. He coughed, fetching up against the wall, legs trembling. He pressed a hand to his churning stomach. Smaller questions then. Safer. Can you hear me? A gentle rock. Are you alone? The movement became slower, hesitant, almost uncertain. Do you want me to stay? The rock insurged again, harder, more insistent. A claustrophobic pressure built in his chest. The attic seemed to shrink around him. He bent forward, bracing his hands on his knees, gulping for air, staring at the swirling dust motes on the floor. When he straightened, the chair was still once more. Against all reason, he felt compelled to touch it again. Heart climbing into his throat, he stepped forward, the floorboards groaning a protest. He laid his palm flat against the backrest. The invasive cold struck instantly, a violating shock that traveled up his arm. He recoiled sharply. The chuckle returned, louder this time, closer, resonating sickeningly in his ears for a fleeting second before fading. He wiped his mouth, fingers unsteady, and scanned the attic's periphery again, desperate for any other explanation. He pried open a couple of boxes, brittle clothes, shards of a painted vase, bundled letters yellowed with age, mundane detritus. Nothing. He turned back to the chair facing the dark void of the window. It sat impassively. He tried projecting defiance. I'm not afraid of you. A slow, almost lazy rock answered, a gesture laden with perceived mockery that sent heat flushing into his face. He swallowed hard against the tightness in his throat. Time for his ultimate test. A question, requiring more than a simple rock. He focused, shaping the intricate thought. How did you come to be here? And what binds you to this attic? The instant a mental sentence concluded, the chair erupted. It hammered back and forth, legs pounding the floor like frantic fists, the sound echoing deafeningly in the confined space. Elias scrambled back, colliding with a stack of forgotten newspapers, dust filling his mouth. He thought the chair might splinter itself, shatter under the force of its own frenzy. But after several terrifying seconds, it abruptly stopped, dead still. Then the laugh again, short, sharp, and chillingly close, seeming to originate just behind his shoulder. His scalp tightened, breath hitched in his throat. He snatched up the lamp, holding its flimsy base before him like a useless shield, muscles screaming with tension. No more questions. He just needed out. "I'm going now." The thought was a plea. The chair remained utterly still. He edged toward the door, step by cautious step. No movement. He risked turning his back, fled the room, and secured the lock, the click echoing finality. Elias collapsed onto his bed, staring sightlessly at the pre-dawn sky filtering through the window. Sleep an impossible dream. Daylight brought a forced attempt at normalcy, a conscious effort to erase the attic from his mind, airing out rooms as if chasing away a lingering odor. But nightfall inevitably resurrected the compulsion. Armed with a heavier flashlight, he found himself once more at the attic's threshold, though he ventured no further than the doorway this time. He played the beam over the silent chair. Dust motes danced in the cone of light. The silence pressed in, amplifying the ringing in his own ears. He swallowed, focusing his intent. "Are you going to move tonight?" A single slow rock broke the stillness. Sweat bloomed under his arms, his hand trembling, causing the light to jitter on the far wall. He remained rooted to the spot. One last question, the most crucial one. "If I leave you alone, will you leave me alone?" The chair responded with a quick, sharp, almost violent rock. Ambiguous. Threat? Agreement? He couldn't decipher it. A cold dread crawled over his skin. He stood there for long minutes, the silence stretching taut between them. He felt the potential energy in the room, knew another thought, another query, would provoke a response, but the will to engage had evaporated, replaced by exhaustion and a profound sense of vulnerability. Slowly, carefully, he stepped back, pulling the door closed, turning the key in the lock one last time. He descended the stairs and sank onto the living room sofa, the television screen reflecting the room's darkness. The house was quiet now, utterly silent. In the nights that followed, Elias maintained his fragile truce. He stayed away from the attic. Faint creaks sometimes whispered from above, ghosts of the previous encounters, but he dismissed them as the house settling, as imagination. He actively suppressed any complex thoughts that might drift toward the locked door, forcing his mind toward blankness. The chair's presence hadn't vanished. It remained a palpable weight in the upper reaches of the house, but he refused it an audience. The key stayed buried in a drawer. An oppressive heaviness sometimes settled in his chest. The memory of icy wood and disembodied laughter, a permanent stain on his consciousness. But he remained downstairs. A week solidified into resolve. He heard the occasional faint stirring overhead, brief and inconclusive. He learned to breathe through the tension, to quiet the questions before they fully formed. The chair did not descend. It made no further claim on his waking hours beyond the unease it radiated. It simply waited, up there in the dust and darkness. Elias didn't know if it was patient or dormant. What intention, if any, lay behind its stillness. He only knew it existed. A silent occupant feeding on the tendrils of fear. He couldn't entirely banish. He cultivated stillness, avoided thought, and waited, tense and vigilant in the quiet, hoping the silence from the attic would hold. The precise instant the veneer cracked in the old man's gaze, I understood the depth of our error. What promised sanctuary, a respite woven from shared whispers and stolen time, had curdled into a desperate scramble for existence. The guest house, stumbled upon like a forgotten illustration. This quaint refuge, nestled deep in the folds of the countryside, was a meticulously crafted lie. My name is Ilara. Liam, my love, and I had orchestrated this escape for months, parched souls yearning for release from the relentless city grind. My days consumed by legal intricacies, his lost to the voracious appetite of his tech startup. Liam unearthed this jewel online, an isolated speck on the map, promising tranquility under the stewardship of a kindly, silver-haired duo. Or so the digital mirage suggested. The journey itself was a balm, asphalt ribbons unfurling through sun-dappled hills and verdant valleys. As the bars vanished from my phone screen, one by one, the city's static seemed to leach from my bones. Liam's hand found mine, a pressure both grounding and electric. His face illuminated by a smile I hadn't witnessed in weeks, perhaps months. Nearly there, he murmured, turning onto a barely there track swallowed by ancient trees. Can you fathom this place? Straight from a storybook. He wasn't wrong. The Victorian manse that materialized through the foliage was arresting. A confection of wraparound verandas and intricate wooden lacework. Window boxes spilled forth riots of improbable color, and a path of raked gravel crunched invitingly towards the entrance. It hovered on the edge of impossibility, almost offensively perfect. As our engine quieted, the heavy oak door swung inward, revealing our proprietors. Silas and Agnes Thorne, figures seemingly plucked from a bygone era. He clad in a reassuring cardigan and bow tie, she draped in floral print and apron. Their waves were synchronized, enthusiastic. "Welcome, children, welcome." Agnes's voice dripped honey, thick and slightly cloying. "Such a relief you've arrived unharmed. Do come inside. The road must have quite taxed you." Silas, despite Liam's polite demurrals, insisted on hoisting our luggage. Following them across the threshold, a dissonant chord struck within me, a persistent hum of wrongness beneath the surface charm. Their smiles felt stretched, their hospitality a shade too fervent. The interior echoed the exterior's curated quaintness, crammed with antiques and peculiar artifacts. Yet, it possessed the sterile air of a stage set, lacking the lived-in soul of a genuine home. "Your accommodations are just a loft," Agnes chirped, gesturing towards a grand staircase. "Our finest chamber, quite suited for a pair such as yourselves." The room itself was undeniably lovely. A vast four-poster bed dominated the space, windows framing idyllic pastoral scenes. But as Agnes fussed with the velvet curtains and Silas deposited our bags with exaggerated care. Their eyes met. A fleeting exchange, almost imperceptible. Yet in that microsecond, I glimpsed something frigid and appraising behind the benevolent masks. "Supper is served promptly at 7, Agnes announced, her beam firmly back in place. "We do hope you'll grace our table. I've concocted something rather special." The moment the door clicked shut behind them, Liam collapsed onto the brocade bedspread with a sigh of pure contentment. "Ilara, this is extraordinary. See? Your worrying was for naught." I manufactured a smile, thin and brittle. "Yes, it's lovely. Just weary, I suppose." We refreshed ourselves and descended for the evening meal. The dining room glowed, warmed by a crackling hearth, a table meticulously laid for 4. The Thorns awaited, radiating welcome. "Ah, there you are," Silas rumbled genially. Be seated, be seated. Agnes has truly surpassed herself this evening." The cuisine, I had to concede, was exquisite. Yet throughout the meal, their scrutiny was relentless. Questions about our lives, our careers, our families. Standard innkeeper fare, perhaps, but delivered with an unnerving intensity. A probing curiosity that tightened a knot in my stomach. "More vintage, my dear?" Agnes inquired, tilting the decanter towards my glass before I could utter a refusal. I sipped out of obligation, a warmth already spreading fuzzily through my thoughts. Liam, however, was well into his 3rd glass, his usual reserve dissolving into effusive praise. "This is magnificent," he slurred softly. "You two, truly, the pinnacle of hosts. Aren't they, Ilara? The absolute pinnacle." I nodded mutely, trying desperately to catch his eye, to transmit a silent alarm. He remained blissfully ensnared in their web of practiced charm. As the hours bled away, my disquiet deepened into a cold dread. The Thorns' smiles never faltered, but their eyes acquired a harder glint. Something predatory stirring in their depths. Pleading fatigue, I practically hauled Liam away from the table, his protests muffled by wine and bonhomie. Back in the supposed safety of our room, my attempts to articulate my fears met a fog of dismissal. "You're being paranoid, Ilara," he mumbled, words thick on his tongue. "They're just exceptionally nice folks. Unwind. Isn't that why we came?" Argument felt futile against his chemically induced calm and my own encroaching exhaustion. Perhaps I was overwrought. Perhaps the city had frayed my nerves more than I knew. Sleep claimed me eventually, a restless, shallow thing riddled with unsettling dreams of unseen watchers. A sound tore me from the depths. Initially, I dismissed it as dream echo, but then it repeated. A low, deliberate groan of ancient floorboards under careful weight. My heart hammered against my ribs. I sat bolt upright. "Liam!" I hissed, shaking his shoulder. He remained lost to the world, a soft snore escaping his lips. Moonlight, filtered through lace curtains, painted a room in stark, unsettling contrasts. As my vision sharpened, I could have sworn The brass doorknob was rotating with agonizing slowness. I held my breath, praying it was a trick of the light, a figment of my frayed nerves. Then the door began to edge open, a sliver of impenetrable hallway darkness, widening inch by painful inch. A figure stood framed in the opening, silhouetted and indistinct. Every instinct screamed, urged me to wake Liam, to flee. Yet terror held me fast, a statue carved from fear. The silhouette glided into the room. In the dimness, the pattern of Agnes Thorne's floral dress swam into focus. She moved with an unnerving fluidity towards the bed, something metallic catching a stray moonbeam in her hand. A blade. My thoughts fractured, struggling to reconcile the kindly hostess with this silent, menacing presence. This wasn't real. It was a nightmare bleeding into wakefulness. Just as she reached the foot of the imposing bed, my voice returned. A ragged croak. "What are you doing?" Agnes Thorne froze. Her head swiveled towards me with unnatural smoothness. The faint light illuminated her features, and the sight turned my blood to ice. The benevolent mask had dissolved entirely, revealing something hollowed out, ancient and ravenous beneath. "Oh, my dear," she rasped, the honey tones replaced by the scrape of dry leaves over stone. "You weren't meant to awaken." My scream, when it finally erupted, was raw, primal, jolting Liam from his stupor. He sat up, blinking in groggy confusion, just as Agnes lunged. The next moments were a maelstrom of flailing limbs and pure terror. Liam, still half-drugged, grappled instinctively with the woman while I scrambled, desperate, for my phone. No signal. Of course. No lifeline. "Run, Elara," Liam choked out, his strength failing against her surprising force. "Get out." For a heartbeat, I was paralyzed, torn between the instinct to fight alongside him and the primal urge to survive. Then Silas Thorne materialized in the doorway, his genial facade replaced by the same predatory emptiness reflected in his wife's eyes. In that instant, I chose a decision that would forever echo in the chambers of my guilt. I bolted past Silas, down the grand staircase, the cold wood stinging my bare feet. Behind me, Liam's shouts mingled with the sickening sounds of struggle. But I didn't dare look back. Bursting through the front door into the chill embrace of the night, I sobbed, gulping air. The sharp gravel bit into my soles as I sprinted towards our car, fingers fumbling frantically in my pajama pocket for the keys. Just as my hand closed around them, the heavy oak door slammed open again. Silas stood silhouetted on the porch, his form subtly distorted, less human. "You cannot leave," he roared, the sound guttural, inhuman. "No one ever leaves." Hands trembling violently, I jammed the key into the ignition, locking the doors nanoseconds before Silas reached the driver's side window. He hammered against the glass, his face contorted, pressed close, eyes burning with a terrifying hunger. I twisted the key, praying. A heart-stopping sputter, then, blessedly, the engine roared to life. Slamming the gear shift into reverse, I narrowly avoided hitting Silas as I fishtailed out of the drive, gravel spitting from the tires. Glancing in the rear-view mirror as I careened down the dirt track, I saw them. Silas, and Agnes Thorne, standing motionless in the middle of the road, watching me vanish into the darkness. And framed in the upstairs window, a fleeting image seared into my memory. Liam's face, pale, wide-eyed with terror. I drove through the suffocating night, tears blurring the winding road. The vision of Liam trapped in that window, a brand upon my soul. I should have dragged him with me. I should have fought, anything, when dawn broke and I finally stumbled into a police station in a nameless town. My story was met with gentle disbelief. Hysteria, they called it. A nightmare induced by fatigue or perhaps something I'd consumed. A patrol car dispatched to investigate the coordinates found nothing. No stately Victorian house, no Silas and Agnes Thorne, no Liam. Only an empty, unremarkable field where I swore the nightmare had stood. 2 years have passed. 2 years spent chasing ghosts. I've bled money on investigators, lost myself in the labyrinthine depths of the internet, even driven back, tracing the route etched into my mind. But the place, the house, the Thorns, they remain stubbornly non-existent, erased from the landscape, perhaps, from reality itself. Sometimes, in the deepest hours of the night, Agnes Thorne's whisper returns, slithering into my thoughts. You weren't meant to awaken. And a chilling doubt takes root. Did I truly escape? Or am I still ensnared within those walls, dreaming this hollow echo of freedom? All I possess now is this certainty, this warning. Should you find yourself navigating lonely country roads, and should a charming guest house emerge from the mist, impossibly perfect, irresistibly quaint, accelerate, keep driving. Some havens are traps, some hosts are not what they seem, and some invitations, once accepted, offer no possibility of departure. You may check in, but checkout is never guaranteed. A single bead of ruby, stark against the forest's umber floor, arrested our steps. Vivid, almost insolent, it pulsed on the dark earth. The first intimation that these woods held more than just solitude. Our easy amble through the wilderness had curdled, abruptly, into something edged and ominous. The weight of that crimson speck settled between us, thick as the humid air. Leo and Maya, university forged our bond, and the wilderness renewed it annually, a pilgrimage away from the city's clamor. This year, we'd sought the deep embrace of a remote northern range, chasing whispers of untamed beauty. 2 days dissolved in a haze of crisp air, breathtaking panoramas, and that effortless kinship woven from shared years. Then came the 3rd day and the rupture. We'd strayed, lured by the rumor of a hidden cascade down a path barely etched into the undergrowth. It was Maya who saw it first, nestled on a fallen leaf like a macabre jewel. Look, she breathed, voice hushed, barely disturbing the quiet. Here. Leo and I converged, eyes fixed on the leaf. An animal, surely, I offered, the words flimsy armor against a rising disquiet. A deer snagged on a thorn, perhaps. Yet the blood's freshness mocked my assertion. It glistened, still wet beneath the sun-dappled ceiling of leaves. Leo knelt, his gaze sweeping the surrounding detritus. "Oh, more," he murmured, gesturing towards a faint spatter trail vanishing deeper into the tangled green. Whatever bled went that way. Unease flickered between us. Retreat was sense. Turn back, erase the discovery, resume the mapped route. But that insidious human itch, curiosity, perhaps something darker, urged us onward. "We should see," Maya insisted, her eyes alight with a strange alloy of apprehension and thrill. "What if someone's injured? They might need us." Logic screamed objections. The folly of pursuing cryptic gore into unknown territory. But Maya's resolve was set, and Leo, I knew, would follow her lead. So, swallowing my instincts, I gave a reluctant nod. We moved with newfound caution, silencing our footfalls against the crackle of leaves and twigs, tracing the crimson thread. The droplets grew bolder, more frequent, coalescing into an undeniable path winding into the forest's heart. The very air seemed to thicken, charged with an unseen current that prickled the skin. 10 minutes, perhaps 15, brought us to a small, unexpected clearing. And what lay within froze the marrow in my bones. Centered there, a deer carcass, not merely hunted, but desecrated. Its limbs were wrenched into grotesque angles, a bizarre tableau against the mossy ground. Around it, inscribed with the creature's own lifeblood, coiled symbols of alien geometry, stark and disturbing. "Gods above," Leo whispered, his face bleached of color. Maya's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes vast pools of horror. "We have to leave," she choked out. "Right now." Before thought could translate to action, a sharp snap echoed from the trees behind us. We spun, hearts hammering cages against ribs as a figure detached itself from the shadows of a broad pine. Tall, skeletal, eyes blazing with a feral light beneath a tangle of matted hair. His clothes, ragged remnants of what might once have been hunting attire, clung to his frame. In one hand, he gripped a vicious-looking blade, its surface dulled by drying blood. "Well now," the figure rasped, a sound like stones grinding together. "Seems we have visitors who weren't invited." I felt Maya's fingers clamp onto my arm, digging painfully into flesh. Leo shifted instinctively, a shield between us and the gaunt stranger. "Apologies," I managed, striving for a calm I didn't possess. "We lost our way. We'll just go." A ghastly smile stretched the man's lips, revealing teeth stained yellow and brown. "Oh, I don't believe so. You've witnessed the preparations. Can't allow loose tongues, can we?" As he spoke, the forest disgorged more figures. 3, 4, then 5, emerging from the periphery, each bearing the same wild aspect, each armed, encircled, trapped. What ensued was a maelstrom of terror, a frantic, blind flight. We crashed through the undergrowth, directionless, heedless of tearing branches or treacherous roots. Escape was the only imperative. Behind us, their guttural shouts and the heavy sounds of pursuit goaded us onward, relentless. My lungs burned, branches lashed my face, but slowing down was unthinkable. We erupted from the dense woods onto a rocky promontory that sheared off into a precipitous ravine. 100 feet below, a river churned, white and furious. Skidding to a halt at the precipice, we were caught fast. The chasm before us, the hunters closing behind. "What do we do?" Maya cried, her breath tearing, eyes wide with panic. Leo's gaze darted, desperate for an alternative. "Not back," he stated grimly. "They'll take us." My stomach plummeted as I peered over the edge into the dizzying void. "We can't jump. It's too far down." The sounds of pursuit intensified. Mere seconds remained. Then my eyes snagged on it. A sliver of rock, a narrow terrace hugging the cliff face, barely wide enough for purchase. It curved away, vanishing around a buttress, hinting at a possible descent. "There," I pointed, voice strained. "Our only way." Maya stared at the precarious ledge, then back towards the tree line where movement flickered. "Are you mad? We'll fall." "It's that or them," Leo countered, his face set like stone. No time remained for debate. We launched ourselves onto the ledge. The stone, slick with river spray, offered treacherous footing. I led, Maya followed, Leo guarded our rear. Halfway around the bend, our pursuers burst from the trees, their triumphant cries turning to frustrated howls as they spotted our desperate gamble. "Keep moving," I yelled back. "Don't stop. Don't look down." My words were punctuated by a choked scream. Maya's foot had slipped on the whetstone. She teetered, a horrifying silhouette against the abyss, before Leo lunged, yanking her back against the cliff's cold embrace. Above, the men grew bolder. One raised a rifle. The sharp crack of the shot reverberated off the rock walls. Stone fragments exploded scant inches from my head. "Move!" Leo roared, shoving Maya forward. "Go! Go! Go!" We scrambled along the ledge, bullets whining past, ricocheting nearby. Just as my arms began to shake uncontrollably, the ledge blessedly widened, revealing a steep, narrow track snaking down the cliff face. We half ran, half slid down this treacherous path, dislodging showers of loose scree. The shouts from the cliff top receded, swallowed by the roar of the river, until finally, mercifully, we tumbled onto the stony banks at the ravine's floor. Without pausing, without breath, we plunged into the glacial torrent. The current seized us powerful, threatening to tear us downstream, but we fought it, clawing our way towards the opposite bank. When we finally dragged our sodden, shivering bodies onto the far shore, the cliff top above was empty. We collapsed gasping, adrenaline warring with bone-deep cold. Think they're gone?" Maya stammered through chattering teeth, Leo nodded, his eyes still scanning the heights. They wouldn't follow us down here. Not easily. As the immediate terror subsided, the starkness of our predicament settled. Miles from our camp, drenched, stripped of supplies, utterly lost. And somewhere in the vast wilderness behind us, a cadre of murderous fanatics likely still prowled. "We need help," I said, forcing my trembling legs to support me. "A ranger post, a road, anything." We followed the riverbank, propelled by exhaustion and the primal need for distance. Darkness was falling when we stumbled, miraculously, onto a dirt track, and another hour crawled by before the headlights of a passing truck offered salvation. The local constabulary met our fragmented, breathless story with initial skepticism, but a subsequent search of the area we indicated unearthed chilling corroboration. The remains of several animals, arranged in ritualistic fashion, signs of a hidden, long-term encampment deep within the woods. Of the men themselves, however, there was no trace. They had dissolved back into the forest's depths, leaving only the lingering horror of their feral eyes and bloodied knives. We never ventured into the wild together again. That trip carved something from us, left us acutely aware of the shadows that pool beneath ancient trees, the darkness that can fester in the human heart. Sometimes, in the dead quiet of night, the echo of those inhuman shouts still finds me, jerking me awake in a cold sweat. I ponder the men, the roots of their madness, and wonder if they still inhabit those woods, waiting patiently for the next unwary souls to trespass upon their unholy ground. The forest guards its secrets fiercely, some sublime, others steeped in terror. We were fortunate, escaping with our lives intact. Yet the scars remain, indelible reminders that the most dangerous predators sometimes walk upright. Tonight, the creature returned. I saw it from my bed, where sleep refused to settle, my lungs laboring against the night's thick stillness. A shadow, fluid and boneless, poured itself across the parched earth near the skeletal back fence. It was the way it moved that snagged my attention, a motion too silken, utterly devoid of sound. Most felines betray their passage. The dry scratch of claws on wood, the whisper of disturbed foliage, the faint percussion of paws on packed dirt. This entity, however, seemed to hover, a marionette drawn by unseen threads inches above the ground. And then those eyes, bleached, vacant orbs like water-worn stones, swiveled, pinning me through the window pane. A tremor seized my heart. I lurched upright, knuckles whitening on the mattress edge. My breath hitched, a knot tightening in my chest. The creature's stare was relentless, unblinking. Something felt intrinsically wrong about it. The sclera were ordinary enough, yet the irises were utterly leached of pigment, as if the very color had bled out into the encroaching darkness. I swallowed against a surge of bile. For a drawn-out moment, I remained perfectly still, hoping my stillness would bore it. It did not waver. It had been there yesterday, and the evening prior, always materializing at the cusp of twilight, always observing. I am an outsider here, it must be said. This rambling structure became mine, following my Uncle Arthur's passing. No heirs, no kin closer than myself. I arrived months ago, envisioning repairs to the groaning floorboards and weeping wallpaper before putting it on the market. The house possesses an age deeper than anticipated. Each footfall inside wrenches a complaint from the timbers. Every tarnished brass doorknob seems to cling with a faint, metallic warmth. Manageable, I thought. But since the arrival of this watcher, the house itself feels alien, subtly resisting my claim. Rising, I padded to the window, pressing my brow to the cool glass. The back porch bulb cast a weak halo that barely kissed the yard's perimeter, yet the creature's silhouette remained stark. Away, I breathed, a sharp rap of knuckles against the pane accompanying the hiss. It remained utterly still, merely inclining its head with an unnerving air of consideration. A cold prickle traced my spine. Enough of this insidious game. I fled down the hallway, slapping switches, bathing the passage in harsh light as I aimed for the kitchen door, the portal to the rear yard. Shoes felt irrelevant. Outside, the air hung heavy with the scent of decaying leaves and ancient wood. My bare soles met the abrasive kiss of the concrete step. My stomach clenched. I expected flight, needed it. But stepping fully into the yard, I found it undisturbed, poised near the fence, tail elegantly coiled. I advanced, arms lifting in a shooing gesture. "Get out," my voice cracked, thin and trembling. The creature blinked, a slow, deliberate motion. Then, directly before my eyes, it ceased to exist, not vanished into shadow, not darted away. It extinguished like snuffing a candle flame. One moment, solid, tangible, the next, absolute absence. My knees buckled. I clutched the porch railing to steady myself. Then, a faint dry scraping from behind. I spun. It was there again, perched at the yard's opposing corner, resuming its vigil. My mouth felt like parchment. Retreating slowly, one hand fumbling blindly for the door handle, I slipped back inside. Locks clicked. Doors, windows, even the archaic pantry latch. My breath came in ragged bursts, mind racing. Hallucination? A trick of the failing light. Yet a deeper certainty resonated. No natural creature moved with such impossible fluidity. It wasn't merely watching. The chilling conviction grew that it was assessing me. Sleep was a fragmented thing that night, fraught with tossing and the clammy sheen of sweat cooling on my neck. I pictured its face pressed to the glass, those colorless eyes charting the restless geography of my blankets. Eventually, I rose, seeking distraction in the cluttered closets. A dusty shoebox yielded documents and a sheaf of brittle photographs. Faded glimpses of the house's former life. A family clustered on the porch steps. An old man, lantern aloft, near a ghost of a barn that once stood sentinel. Uncle Arthur's had hinted at a history deeper than I knew, details lost to time. One image arrested me. A young woman standing by the back fence, cradling something indistinct. Behind her, barely discernible, a slender form with sharply pointed ears. The photo swam with blur, yet the feline shape seemed faceless, marked only by two pale loci where eyes should be. Ice traced its way down my vertebrae. I set the photograph aside, my pulse a frantic drum. I needed grounding. Tea seemed a sensible anchor, its sharp, herbal scent momentarily cleansing the kitchen air. I tried to banish the unease, but as I poured the steaming liquid, my own reflection in the dark window above the sink snagged my gaze. Tired eyes, sleep-tousled hair, and fleetingly, something else superimposed behind me. I whirled, nearly upsetting the cup. The kitchen stood empty, yet the palpable sense of a recent presence lingered, hovering just beyond the hallway's threshold. The following afternoon, I compelled myself outdoors. The world felt blessedly ordinary under the gentler light. For a brief respite, breathing came easily. I hammered a loose porch board, hauled out refuse, mundane acts asserting normalcy. As evening bled into the sky, curtains were drawn, locks rechecked. I paced the living room, the ponderous tick of the grandfather clock nearest us, amplifying the pregnant silence. The familiar thoracic tightness returned. Sweat beaded on my temple. Suddenly, a delicate scratching, like fingernails on wood, whispered from the hallway leading to my bedroom. I swallowed, my steps feather-light on the complaining floorboards. Each creak felt like a sibilant warning. Reaching the bedroom door, I pressed my ear against the wood. Silence. Holding my breath, I twisted the knob and pushed inward. It was inside, perched atop my dresser, tail executing a slow hypnotic sweep. My heart momentarily ceased. The windows were latched. The door had been secured. How? Utterly silent, it simply regarded me. I tried again, shouting, clapping, desperate to break the spell. It winked out of existence. No smoke, no blur, simply gone. This time, it rematerialized beside my closet. I lunged, a guttural sound tearing from my throat. But before my fingers could close on empty air, it vanished once more, reappearing behind me, closer still. My head throbbed, vision tunneling. The acrid tang of my own fear sharp in my nostrils. The creature's presence felt suffocating, as if the very walls were contracting. I stumbled backward out of the room, slamming the door shut. After several shuddering breaths, clarity pierced the panic. I had to understand. Ignorance would unravel me. Hours were lost in a frantic search, peering behind dust-laden drapes, delving into forgotten trunks. Finally, beneath the loose floorboard in the study, a small wooden coffer. Inside, handwritten notes, brittle and yellowed, lay alongside another photograph. This one depicted a man, my great-grandfather perhaps, holding aloft a peculiar mirror. Its frame was ornate, carved with serpentine shapes reminiscent of coiled tails and pointed ears. Scrawled on the photo's reverse, a single word: Sentinel. A mirror. The house once contained a mirror, etched with motifs echoing the creature's form. My gaze swept the study walls. Nothing. Room by room I searched, displacing furniture, probing closets, until my eyes caught an anomaly on the attic door panel. A faint impression in the layers of paint. The ghost of something once hung there. The cloying scent of stale dust and time-rotted wood assaulted me as I ascended into the gloom. My flashlight beam sliced through the darkness, heart hammering against my ribs. Behind a stack of decaying timbers, I found it, the mirror. Its surface was filmed with grime, but the intricate carvings along the frame were discernible. An inexplicable watering stung my eyes. Static electricity seemed to prickle my skin. As I reached to lift it, a soft thump resonated from the attic's far corner. The flashlight beam jerked across the dust-furred floorboards. The creature was there. Its eyes caught the light, reflecting it back as pure, colorless voids. My pulse surged into a frantic rhythm, my throat constricted. Instinct, cold and certain, whispered the connection. The creature and this mirror were intertwined. A guardian, a watcher, here to observe me, catalog my responses, perhaps prepare the space for some encroaching force beyond comprehension. A metallic taste, fear and rust, coated my tongue. I backed away, flashlight held defensively before me. The creature remained immobile. It blinked, that unnervingly slow cadence, and with each closing of its lids, I felt a sympathetic pulse deep within my own chest. My vision swam. The attic floor seemed to undulate beneath my feet. I stumbled, dropping to one knee, gasping. The flashlight beam trembling across the cobweb-laced rafters. Action was imperative. I couldn't remain cornered. Scraping together the dregs of my courage, I lunged, snatching the mirror from the floor. The frame's sharp metal edges bit into my palms. I nearly fumbled it. The creature hissed then, the first sound I'd ever drawn from it. A desiccated, rasping exhalation that coiled sickeningly in my gut. A wave of profound nausea washed over me. I thrust the mirror between us, aiming its surface at the entity, as if warding off evil. For a disorienting instant, I thought I saw its reflection distort, smearing across the grimy glass as though the mirror itself rejected the image. My heart hammered in my throat. The creature's form shimmered, then dissolved. This time, however, it did not instantly reappear. Scrabbling from the attic, I clutched the mirror to my chest. Downstairs, I leaned it face down against the hallway wall, irrationally hoping its obscured surface would sever the connection, blind whatever presence it channeled. I waited, sweat tracing cold paths down my spine, anticipating the reappearance of those pale eyes at every turn. Nothing manifested. Sleep that night was a threadbare thing. Every settling groan of the old house jolted me alert. My skin felt hypersensitive, prickling as if brushed by unseen fingertips. I tried to soothe myself with the thought of a small victory. I possessed the mirror, had hidden it away, but the conviction remained unshakable. The creature lingered in the periphery, aware of my trespass, knowing I had dared to meddle. Morning found my eyes gritty with exhaustion. I ventured a cautious look into the hallway. The mirror remained, face averted. I resisted scrutinizing the frame too closely, yet couldn't help but notice the carvings seemed somehow sharper, as if freed from a layer of obscuring grime overnight. Tiny feline shapes seemed newly distinct within the metalwork, each bearing hollowed-out sockets for eyes. A flutter of panic stirred in my chest. This wasn't over. It was merely paused. The creature could return. Perhaps there were others. My fingers trembled as they brushed my cheek. I felt altered, feverish, unsteady. Rubbing my eyes, I caught a flicker of something pale in my own reflection within the window glass. Something unnervingly wrong about my irises. Stepping closer, hands shaking, I peered again. The light was poor. A trick of perception, perhaps, but for one heart-stopping second, my own eyes seemed washed out, mirroring the creature's bleached stare. I recoiled, pulse pounding. The realization settled, cold and heavy. This feeling, this presence, would never truly leave. The creature, the sentinel, and whatever power it represented had imprinted itself upon me. It knew my habits now, the house's secrets, the geography of my fear. It possessed my scent. Outside, a branch scraped against the window pane, mimicking the sound of a faint claw. I flinched, breath catching. Forcing myself, I looked hard into the glass once more. Only my own face stared back, pale, wide-eyed, the dim hallway stretching behind me. But I felt it. The silence was too taut, charged with unseen potential. I turned away, feigning ignorance of the subtle warp at the edge of my vision, the suggestion of something crouching just beyond sight, poised to return. And the next time, certainty would be a luxury I couldn't afford. Certainty of where it was, or what it desired. I knew only that it had irrevocably unsettled me, and that I now carried a fragment of its void within myself. The house stood quiet, but the oppressive weight in the air declared the sentinel's enduring vigil. And I was no longer sure I would recognize my own reflection when it finally chose to show its face again. Hemlock Hollow, Vermont. Solitude was the lure, the prompts whispered by the pines flanking my dead-end street. Nestled at the very tip of the cul-de-sac, my house was an island, buffered from the gentle suburban hum, the distant laughter of children, the rhythmic passage of dog walkers, the quiet lives unfolding behind curtained windows. This profound stillness was precisely what I'd sought. A haven tucked away from the world's glamour. Or so I tragically miscalculated. Night had deepened, spilling past the midnight hour, and exhaustion finally claimed me. Beneath the cool sheets, the day's burdens began to dissolve. Sleep a welcome balm beckoning from the edges of consciousness. The house sighed around me, settling into the profound quietude of the late hour. Then, a shard of sound pierced the velvet stillness. The doorbell. I bolted upright, heart seizing, disorientation clouding my thoughts. Who, in this slumbering hollow, would summon me now? My phone's glow confirmed the ungodly hour, 12:17 a.m. Silence descended once more, heavy, expectant. A prank perhaps? A mistaken address? I held my breath, willing the intrusion away. Seconds stretched, taut, before the bell chimed again. A longer, more insistent peal that vibrated with purpose. A current of unease propelled me from bed, a prickle tracing the nape of my neck. Instinct urged me toward a window, but my bedroom overlooked the shadowed backyard. Seeing the front porch meant traversing the darkened hallway. Again, the summons, that sustained, demanding ring. Drawing a ragged breath, I reasoned away the fear. A neighbor in distress. A stranded motorist, phone clutched like a talisman. I started down the corridor toward the unseen threshold. Closer now, a wrongness settled in the air. No shuffle of feet on the wooden porch planks, no telltale shadow pooling beneath the door. It felt vacant, as though the ringer simply materialized, pressed the button, and waited, invisible. My hand hovered near the deadbolt. Hello? The word emerged thin, unsteady. Is anyone there? Only silence answered, thick and viscous, pressing against my eardrums. I leaned closer, ear pressed to the cool wood, straining for any whisper of movement, of breath, nothing. With another shaky breath, I risked the peephole, bracing for an eye staring back. But the fisheye lens revealed only vacancy. Streetlight painted the porch, The driveway, the manicured lawn in weak, aqueous light. No one. A chill, sharp and invasive, snaked up my spine. Then the bell, again. I recoiled, heart slamming against my ribs, and peered out once more. Still empty. Utterly, inexplicably empty. Comprehension frayed. How? A fleeting impulse to wrench the door open, to confront the void, warred with a deeper, colder instinct for self-preservation. "Who's out there?" I called, louder this time. The sound swallowed by the night. No response. Just the weight of that unnerving stillness. I stood frozen, adrift until my phone vibrated in my hand. Not a call, not a text. A notification, motion detected by the front door security camera. My fingers trembled as I navigated the app, hitting play on the recorded event. The familiar view of my empty porch materialized on the screen, bathed in the faint ambient glow. I scrubbed forward, watching the time code advance. Nothing, no sign of life. But then, at the precise instant, the timestamp aligned with the doorbell chime, a flicker, a distortion in the pixels, a momentary warp in the image, too quick, too ethereal for substance, like heat haze or something moving just beyond the camera's ability to resolve. My skin tightened. Rewind. Play. Again. That ghostly ripple, present yet not. A fleeting aberration where something should have been. The doorbell screamed anew, yanking me back to the present. This time it didn't stop. A sustained, insistent pressure, as if someone were leaning their entire weight against the button. I stumbled back from the door, thoughts scattering like startled birds. What now? Confrontation felt suicidal. Inaction, unbearable. My trembling fingers fumbled with the phone, dialing 911. The words stumbled out to the dispatcher, sounding thin, ridiculous even to my own ears. A phantom bell ringer, tormenting me in the dead of night. I could almost hear her professional skepticism through the line, but she promised to dispatch a patrol car. Hanging up, I paced the length of the hall, a caged animal, eyes darting constantly toward the door. The bell remained silent now, but the feeling lingered. An unseen presence, watching, waiting. An eternity seemed to pass before headlights swept the drive, bathing the interior in stark, momentary relief. A patrol car idled by the curb. Unlocking the door, I stepped onto the porch as the officer approached, his expression calm, routine. "Evening, ma'am," he began. "You reported a disturbance. Someone ringing your bell?" I nodded, a flush of embarrassment rising. Yes, it kept ringing for maybe half an hour. But there's no one here. I checked the camera, but... He arched an eyebrow, checked around the property. Kids pulling a prank, maybe. "No," I admitted, shaking my head. I didn't want to go out alone. He gave a curt nod, his gaze sweeping the quiet street. "All right, stay put. I'll do a quick sweep." I watched his flashlight beam slice through the darkness as he circled the house, disappearing around the side. The night air felt colder now, the silence more profound, more oppressive. Minutes later, he reappeared, shaking his head. Nothing, no footprints, no signs anyone's been lurking. "Are you positive you didn't perhaps imagine it?" "Stress can play tricks, ma'am. My protest died on my lips. Was I sure? The exhaustion, the isolation, maybe he was right. Standing there in my pajamas, trying to articulate the inexplicable dread, I felt utterly foolish. I don't know. I mumbled, cheeks burning. Maybe I did. He offered a practiced, reassuring smile. It happens. Give us another call if anything else occurs. I murmured my thanks, watching the cruiser pull away, its tail lights shrinking into the darkness, leaving me utterly alone once more. Retreating inside, I secured the deadbolt, the click echoing in the sudden stillness. I stood for a long moment, listening, trying to reclaim the shattered sense of peace. It was over. Turning to finally seek the refuge of my bed, the doorbell rang again. I froze, ice flooding my veins. My head snapped back toward the door. Impossible. The police were barely gone. They'd found nothing. Yet the bell persisted, a long, steady, unwavering tone, as if pressed by an unyielding finger. Mechanically, I moved back to the door, shaking uncontrollably, and pressed my eye into the peephole. Empty. The porch remained stubbornly, terrifyingly vacant. But the ringing drilled into the house, relentless, inescapable, pressing in from all sides. I backed away, panic clawing at my throat. The sound swelled, amplifying, echoing inside my own skull. I clamped my hands over my ears, a useless gesture against the internal assault. Then, abruptly as it began, silence crashed down, absolute and deafening. I stood rigid, every nerve taut, anticipating the next ring. It never came. A ragged, shuddering breath escaped me. My hands still trembled violently as I turned, intending to flee to my room. That's when my gaze snagged on something alien against the floorboards, just inside the threshold. A small crumpled square of paper. It hadn't been there before. Not when I'd opened the door for the officer. My heart hammered against my ribs. With a hand that felt disconnected from my body, I reached down and picked it up. The paper felt wrong, cold, almost icy to the touch. I unfolded it, my breath catching in my throat as I read the 5 words, jaggedly inscribed in a shaky hand. I'm already inside. The room seemed to pulse inward, the shadows deepening, coalescing into monstrous shapes. My gaze darted wildly, searching every corner, every patch of darkness. I scrambled backward, the chilling message clutched tight, a contaminated thing, time fractured. I don't know how long I stood paralyzed, listening for the slightest creak, the faintest breath. Nothing. Only the vast, terrifying emptiness of the house. Eventually, retreating to the living room couch seemed the only option. My bedroom felt impossibly remote, unsafe. Huddled there, bathed in the glare of every light I could switch on. Phone clutched tight, eyes scanning relentlessly. I waited out the endless night. Sleep was unthinkable. When the first hesitant rays of dawn finally infiltrated the windows, painting the room in pale, uncertain light, I packed a single bag with frantic haste. I fled Hemlock Hollow and its whispering pines, leaving the silence I had once craved, now transformed into a scream I couldn't escape. I have never looked back. The memory remains indelible. The instant my worn boot crossed the threshold into that forsaken railroad tunnel, camera clutched tight, the beam of my torch a nervous tremor against the dark. Nothing more than sepulchral quiet and the skeletal remains of industry. That's all I had anticipated. An assumption shattered the moment I registered another respiration, not my own, sighing from the depths. I'd unearthed the tunnel's existence on some dusty corner of a local history archive online. Decades dormant, the line was a ghost, whispered about in forums, tales of intriguing arches, decaying supports, photographic fodder for a personal project. Companionship proved elusive that weekend. Everyone else claimed prior engagements. So, alone I went, shouldering a modest pack, water, a spare light, camera essentials. Sundown painted the sky as I arrived. The tunnel's maw gaped wider than expected. A raw cavity in the hillside. Rails long plundered, leaving only a treacherous floor of rock and ballast sloping into shadow. Concrete lips crumbled at the edges, besieged by tenacious weeds and fledgling shrubs. My torch beam sliced inward, swallowed instantly. It illuminated only fleeting glimpses. Faded graffiti scars on the weeping walls. The glint of water dripping from unseen fissures overhead. Each drop a percussive note against the concrete. Hesitantly, I stepped inside. The air turned instantly colder, biting compared to the evening warmth. Deeper in I pushed, the torchlight sweeping across the concrete canvas. Crude tags, relics of past trespassers, marked the initial stretch. But the further I ventured, the sparser the graffiti became, yielding to untouched, damp stone. A miasma filled the passage, musty, the smell of mineral dampness and ancient mold. My own footfalls caromed off the close confines, unnaturally loud. My breath too seemed amplified, though I consciously kept it even. A few test shots flared brilliantly, the flash too harsh for this profound gloom. Adjusting settings, I unfolded the tripod for a longer exposure, its legs precarious on the uneven scree. It was during this setup, a moment of stillness, that I first sensed it. A whisper of sound from the blackness behind me. Breathing? My own echo, surely. I tried syncing the rhythm. Inhale, exhale. No match. Mine was quicker, tinged with the low hum of exploratory excitement. The sound I heard was languid, deliberate. An acoustic anomaly, I reasoned, forcing myself back to the camera. Yet, as I reviewed the captured image on the small screen, a prickle of ice traced my spine. The breathing returned, undeniable now. Steady, calm. Someone drawing breath with meticulous care. I killed the torch, plunged into absolute black. Could I discern a silhouette against the now distant, fading geometry of the entrance? Nothing. The darkness was palpable, a physical weight. No light penetrated this far. I held my own breath, listening intently, my pulse a frantic drum against my eardrums. A distant drip. Then closer, the distinct scuff of something shifting on the tunnel floor. Not me. My thumb found the switch, the beam snapping back to life, cutting a frantic arc. Empty space, rough walls slick with moisture. An old maintenance portal, rusted half shut, slumped on one side. The floor littered with pebbles, the ghosts of discarded cans. Animal, I told myself. Water echoing strangely. Still, the unease coiled tighter. Onward. The torch beam danced methodically, left, right, pausing occasionally to capture the skeletal beauty of overhead supports. The dripping grew more insistent, a constant weeping from ceiling wounds. The air grew colder still, my exhalations now visible as faint plumes. Walls glistened, streaked with long trails of damp. Then I saw them. Stranger markings, smears against the concrete. Closer inspection revealed their origin. Handprints. Shockingly distinct, seemingly fresh, moisture beading around the negative space of fingers and palms. My heart gave a painful lurch. These weren't random stains, they were impressions, human hands pressed flat. Water traced the edges of each print, a slow, glistening tear. Tentatively, I touched one. A slick, frigid surface. My fingertips came away wet. Wiping them absently on my jeans, I swept the light low, searching the ground for corresponding tracks. Only my own boot prints disturbed the thin layer of dust and scattered stones. And then, the breathing. Closer, right behind me. I froze, spun around. The torch illuminated only the vacant corridor. The same weeping walls, the same uneven floor. A tremor started in my hand, making the light jitter. I half expected a figure materializing from the shadows. Nothing. My mouth was parchment. A forced, deep breath, just the dark, my mind playing tricks. Yet the conviction of a presence, unseen but near, refused to dissipate. Forward seemed the only option. Reach the other end. The tunnel stretched perhaps half a mile, the archive said. I adopted a determined pace, trying to tune out the soft, intermittent scuffs and whispers that seemed to dog my steps. Each footfall felt like a hammer blow. My back settled heavier, the strap biting into my shoulder. The chill air numbed my face. A subtle draft began to push against me, originating from deeper within the tunnel's gullet. A faint, cool exhalation from the earth. I paused to sip water, my hand unsteady as I raised the bottle. A few swallows, and then I listened. That rhythmic respiration started again, seemingly just over my shoulder. I whipped around, torch held high like a weapon, nothing but empty, dripping stone. Heart slamming against my ribs. Move, keep moving. Minutes later, a light tap on my shoulder, like a single finger prod. I flinched violently, nearly fumbling the torch. Spun so fast I staggered. Light flared wildly, only the damp wall inches behind me. My shoulder tingled where the contact occurred. A drip from the ceiling? No. The rock directly above was dry. Raw panic surged, sweat beading on my forehead despite the glacial air. The torch flickered, emitting a faint buzz. A sharp rap with my palm steadied the beam. I forced myself onward, faster now. My steps a frantic echo chamber. The torch beam, aimed low, picked out the occasional rotten railroad tie, half buried, treacherous. Ahead, a dim luminescence began to bleed through the black. Not daylight. The sun had long set. A faint, ethereal shimmer, its source hidden. A short distance further, the tunnel broadened into a wider chamber, perhaps an old loading area or maintenance bay. The air here was markedly colder. My light slid across something on the left, a makeshift platform. Closer now, I saw them. Small candles, melted into grotesque puddles of wax, arranged in a circle. All extinguished, dark stains on an old sheet of metal laid across fractured cinder blocks. Symbols were crudely scratched into the metal surface, jagged and indecipherable. Beside this arrangement lay a small pile of bones. Not human, surely. Delicate, perhaps avian. Clustered together. An altar. The word formed unbidden in my mind. a deeply unsettling tableau in the frigid, silent dark. I recoiled, palms slick with sweat. That peculiar draft intensified, stirring the fine hairs on my arms. Cold enough to provoke a shudder. It carried a damp, loamy scent, like disturbed earth. It slipped through the weave of my jacket, amplifying my vulnerability. My breathing came in ragged bursts. Steady yourself. The torch swept around, probing the corners. More wet handprints adorned the walls near this crude shrine. As if someone had braced themselves there, I leaned towards one, watching a bead of water detach and trace a path down the concrete. A scrape sounded behind me, something sliding across stone. I spun, the torch beam catching. Something, a flicker of movement near the altar, a shape retracting swiftly behind a thick support column. Or had it? My pulse roared in my ears as I advanced, light fixed on the spot. Nothing, no one. My mouth tasted like copper. Turn back, the rational thought screamed. But another impulse warred with it. The need to see the end, find another vantage point, capture proof of this place. I came for unique photos, didn't I? Who would believe this altar story otherwise? Quickly, I raised the camera. The flash momentarily banishing the shadows, starkly illuminating the cracked walls, the metal sheet, the waxen residue. Then, the breathing again. This time, distinctly to my right. I pivoted, firing the flash blindly in that direction out of sheer reflex. The afterimage burned empty space, wet stone. My hands shook uncontrollably toward the faint glimmer that had to be the exit. The tunnel began a slight curve, obscuring the final view. The breeze strengthened, pushing against my face, rustling unseen debris on the floor. Loose pebbles skittered. Scraps of paper danced like spectral moths. My torch probed ahead, searching for the opening. No daylight, no clear exit. Sealed off, or just further still? I paused near a jagged hole torn in the wall, leading into what looked like a narrow side passage, bristling with exposed rebar. Water pooled at its entrance. A flicker of morbid curiosity urged me to investigate, but a deeper instinct recoiled. That particular darkness felt wrong. I moved on. Another soft scrape from behind. Pivot, torch high. Nothing, breath catching in my throat. I pressed onward, consumed now by a singular desire. Escape, my skin felt clammy beneath my clothes. My boots scuffed loudly on the uneven ground. Every drip, every rustle made me jump. Tension knotted my shoulders, aching up my neck. Was someone else here? Hiding? Watching? The thought sent a fresh wave of cold dread through me. Just find the exit. Go home. Finally, the passage straightened. Ahead, a definite pale glow. Moonlight filtering through the far entrance. Relief washed over me, potent, almost buckling my knees. I surged forward, nearly tripping on loose rock, almost there. One last look back, the torch beam sliced through the empty corridor. And then I saw them. Wet footprints on the dusty floor. Prints I hadn't noticed before, not shaped like my heavy boots, narrower. Barefoot, at least 4 distinct impressions, leading my way. From deeper in, or from right where I now stood? My heart hammered violently. Simultaneously, that same light pressure tapped my shoulder again. I cried out, spinning wildly, flashlight beam slashing the air. Who's there? My voice fractured, echoing endlessly down the stone throat. Silence answered, punctuated only by a distant rhythmic drip. My head throbbed. Backing towards the moonlight, face fixed on the darkness I was leaving, torch trembling. Mere steps from the opening, the breeze became a sudden colder gust, shoving me forward. I clicked off the torch, letting my eyes adjust. The blessed silhouettes of bushes, the jagged edge of broken concrete outside. I stumbled out, gulping the cool night air, legs shaking, turning. I stared back into the tunnel's black mouth, silent, still, utterly empty to the eye, but not empty. The handprints, the altar, the bones, that breathing, that touch. I stood there for a long minute, maybe two, collecting the scattered fragments of my composure. The relative quiet of the world outside felt alien after the echoing confines. My camera felt heavy in my hand. Later, I'd see the photos, mostly blurred captures of dark walls, water streaks, that unsettling altar. No figure caught in the flash, just ambiguous shapes in shadowed corners. Without conscious thought, I began the trek back to the car, the path seeming longer now, checking over my shoulder with every few steps. Inside the vehicle, doors locked. I sat gripping the wheel, breath sawing in my chest, skin damp, engine on, headlights cutting the darkness. I drove, eyes flicking constantly to the rearview mirror, expecting, seeing only empty roads pooling out behind me. No explanation ever surfaced for the breathing, the prints, the touch. The photos reside on a hard drive, digital ghosts of damp stone and melted wax. Looking at them still conjures that specific, visceral chill. I won't be returning. Ask me about fear, about places steeped in palpable wrongness. And this derelict tunnel is the immediate, visceral answer. And whenever memory dredges up the phantom sensation of that unseen hand upon my shoulder, my skin still crawls.